Welcome to the Art of War in the Wild mini-conference. I'm your host, Sayal Her. This mini-conference is composed of a few panel conversations focused on the real-world application of timeless wisdom. The backdrop is that we are in a world experiencing a leadership crisis on a global scale across various dimensions, both personal and professional, private and public, among many other dimensions, resulting in widespread struggle and suffering. Much of what we're experiencing stems from embracing an almost Pollyannish perspective that romanticizes leadership, human nature, and reality, sterilizes our organizations and enterprises, and infantilizes people in leadership roles, among others. When in reality, we should be embracing a more realistic perspective that integrates every aspect of human nature and reality, including the good, the bad, and the ugly. The Art of War, or the Sun Tzu, provides profound timeless insights into leadership, strategy, culture, conflict, execution, and much more, offering approaches for surviving and thriving in today's reality. The objective of these conversations is to engage a few forward thinkers and forward doers who are reshaping the modern world through the wisdom of the art of war, to explore the gap between principles and practice where reality and theory converge, to explore applying ancient wisdom to modern-day scenarios, highlighting the dynamics between intentions and outcomes, and to illuminate insights for engaging in challenging environments. Welcome to the Art of War in the Wild mini-conference.
Happy day to everybody. Hello, good to have you, and also welcome to all our viewers who are with us from wherever you are. Welcome to us. This is the second conversation. We started a conversation on Tuesday with this group, except that we have one wonderful new member who will be introduced in a second, and we are continuing that today. My name is Whit Raymond. I'm the moderator of this, which means I'm supposed to keep my mouth very quiet. And I'll be challenged, I'm sure, by the members here. But we've had a really good conversation. What I'd like to do for the Art of the War in the Wild, this segment, is first do an introduction, just very brief from each member, just for the viewers, for all of you to get acquainted. And then I will lay out where we're going to go from there. Does that work?
That works.
Good. So who would like to start? Cynthia, how about you want to kick this off?
Of course. My name is Cynthia Chambers, and I am an IT professional. And I use the Art of War to coach/mentor execs, leads, scrum masters, really anyone I come in contact with. It's become very essential to how I show up every day. So I'm grateful for that.
Perfect. Thank you. Steve?
Steve Fastabend, coach, consultant, person who tries to make things better. And Art of War to me is something I am continuously learning and evolving towards. But it transcends work. It is my personal life, my social life, my work life. It just continues to permeate my being.
Awesome.
Well, that's a strong word. Like that one. Thank you. Mark, how about you, sir?
Good afternoon. I'm Mark McGrath. I'm the Chief Learning Officer of AGLX. We are a adaptive strategy firm. There's a lot of work on the art of war and the theories of John Boyd that goes into our work. The Sun Tzu was a definitive influence on John Boyd, and what we endeavor to do is integrate those concepts and ideas with our clients across a wide range of industries, often in groups, often also one-on-one with senior executive leaders. And then I'm the co-host of the podcast No Way Out, which is a podcast dedicated to the work and life of John Boyd and continuing to develop those ideas. And then I also author the Substack called The World of Reorientation, which is another collection of where I write about these things and hope to inspire and influence others to use them. I see the applications not really in warfare, not only limited to warfare, but in any place where humans are together making decisions. So
terrific. Thank you. Sai?
Thank you so much, and a pleasure to be here, and a pleasure to be with this group, and likewise the audience that's joining us live or recorded. I'm a coach, consultant, practitioner, if you will. I have over 4 decades of experience in working with organizations, really focused on transformation at every level. Worked with hundreds of organizations, thousands of individuals and teams to really help them calibrate their business models and their, if you will, operating models to achieve impact in the world. At the end of the day, I like to say I'm a student of life, if you will, a pracademic in praxis, and fundamentally really focused on the human dynamics and as those human dynamics unfold in the human condition in the world that we find ourselves. So really a pleasure to be here.
Great. Well, thank you. And it's again, wonderful to have all you viewers here. Look, so a couple things came out from Tuesday. I just want to touch on them very, very briefly as highlights. And it may serve to make a bridge, but also stimulate some things, because once we get going, the conversation, I'm sure, will have its own life. But one of the topics and things that came up that we talked about was the power of the wisdom of the text. And it's about how people take advantage of the opportunity of the guidance and the wisdom that's within it. And it's really about, I was thinking about when I listened to everybody on Tuesday, but one of the things that stood out for me was about how you become your own sage. And you think about, what does that mean to become that? Because everybody's got their own thing. And when you look at the wisdom of the text, it reinforces that. And Steve already highlighted too a really important point about that has a lot to do with the fundamental truths and wisdoms. And that's really, we did a lot about contrasting that with dealing with easy solutions or trying to control, win, lose, and mindsets that are like that get in the way of that. So that was that was the second point. Third point was taking advantage of the opportunity, the challenge, and quest to grow. That was something that came up. As Sai had said, the text chooses you. It's not just read and you apply the concepts. And there really is something where people have to find some way to get drawn to this work and this journey, the struggle, which is really important. And then related to that was the value of having some kind of a person as a guide, an exemplar. There are some resources for growth as you think about it. And you think about our journeys. We have our texts, we have challenges and / visions. We have experiences, and we have beings as guides. And those are the resources that we typically can draw upon. And the text that is there, what stood out really is one of the core ones to connect to all of those. So that was the third point. And the last point, on the next to last, was there's 2 more. Did I lose you, or are you all set? Can you still hear me?
Now we can hear you, Whit.
Yeah, on the screen, but I paused. So the other was about the difference between struggle and work. And we talked about the importance of being able to do that. Sai talked about embracing the struggle. Cynthia talked about doing the work to change my normal, which I think is a very powerful concept just in terms of that. And what does it mean to really have ownership of what it is that I'm on in my own path? And so that whole part we came up with, started to realize language is also an important issue, and how you make meaning out of that depends on the community. So we really ended up in a place where we saw struggle and work as 2 sides of the same coin. That was an idea that came out of that. And then the last idea that I think is really important, which actually bridges us in here, is the importance of people having a desire and a readiness to do the work, to do the struggle, to do the journey. And not everybody is at the same time. I often think about how you plant seeds with individuals, or you plant seeds in organizations to make things ready when you see that it's not quite there. So there is that aspect, and how do we unleash that and tap that into other individuals? So those are the big ones. And I think that what I thought about we might do is, like, just to kick off, is to think about what it takes to progress in becoming your own sage commander. What does it take, and what has it taken so far? Because we're all on this journey, And wherever we are, what has it taken, do you notice, for you to become your own sage commander, as it's expressed through the text? So if you could think about one or two lessons, examples that would be really helpful to highlight, that would be wonderful. And I'm going to leave it open. Again, this is a conversation. Feel free to ask each other questions, build on each other's ideas, expand and explore. So whoever would like to go, kick it off.
Well, I guess I should go because I missed Tuesday, so I've given this a lot of thought. What does
Good
it
timing,
take?
Mark. That was very good timing.
What does it take? I discuss this with leaders often. It takes humility, and that humility within that self-reflection to build one's own self-awareness and constantly seek to improve their self-awareness is the only way that you can have effective and meaningful situational awareness. In other words, if I'm not self-reflective and I'm not constantly improving myself and I'm not constantly looking to better myself, there's no way that I could have any awareness of what's actually going on around me. I'm going to miss a lot. And it's very common in leadership that you run into a lot of individuals, to quote Taylor Swift, they can stare directly in the sun, but never into the mirror. And that inability to do that, I think, suggests that someone doesn't have the necessary humility that they have to be a leader that can inspire and influence others to pursue goals enthusiastically. So, but that's what I would say. That's what I would suggest.
So, Mark, I love that. Great way to kick off. I would go back to my improv class and say yes and. So I totally agree with you. I'd say and coupled with vulnerability, right? It took me time to understand that when I opened myself up and became vulnerable, it changed my connection, my influence, my learning, and my ability to teach. So I think there's an intensely personal aspect to Art of War in the wild.
Steve, could you just to ground this a little bit, could you give an example of when the vulnerability became a particular challenge for you and that became so important?
Yeah, I think I give the tagline at the beginning. I don't know is not. It's a very powerful thing, right? And we need permission to say that in some cases. I was working with a client, and I had two people that were really, one was schooled as a lawyer and very, very pragmatic about things, could change his points of view quite nimbly. He was a product manager, and his opponent was the chief architect, and he was very analytical, and they're fighting with each other all the time. And I switched from trying to come to a solution because I thought if I think about this hard enough, there's a right solution, and totally pivoted and just talked to the lawyer one-on-one and said, how do you think? How do you, what does your background as a lawyer give you for fuel in your decision-making and communication process? I said the same thing to the architect. And then I said, you two need to talk to each other, and letting go and saying, I'm not the technical expert, although I have some technical expertise. I'm not the social engineer, although I love to make people work together or assist people to work together, and just lighting the fire and stepping away, saying, I don't know what the answer is, guys, but you two need to figure this out. It turned out to be very, very powerful to me. And I credit Art of War because I moved the situation from you're wrong and you're right to we are here for something that is the greater good, and our reward is the journey.
Yeah. great, man. Thank you.
I would add to that self-reflection from what Mark said, self-awareness and the ability to challenge oneself. I constantly challenge anywhere I'm feeling resistance to my environment to find out first where it's coming from, and then to see whether or not it's me or is it the environment. And trusting yourself to take action, because the more you take action, the more you can kind of then self-reflect to see whether or not you missed anything. And each time you're getting better and better and better just by that cycle of taking action, trusting yourself, and self-reflecting to see whether or not you're growing. Because each time you should be a little bit more, I missed 3 things this time. Okay, so next time I only missed 2 things. And so you're just constantly getting better and better. But without the self-reflection, to Mark's point, you won't know whether or not you're moving the needle or not.
You know, Cynthia, it sounds like when I think about it, I heard you say 2 things. One is self-reflection, which is about the past. Self-awareness is about the moment, right now, instantaneously. And you talk about the importance of both those. Are there any particular circumstances, just to make this more real for who we are as people, where self-awareness gets challenged because the environment that you're in makes it easy to get distracted and away from self-awareness in such a way that it's hard to do that? That for you, that you would know, that you notice in your pattern, because we each are going to have our own, right? We're different people.
Well, I think your perspective in how you're challenging yourself, whether or not you're looking at it is because my past experiences, or is it because of what's happening right there in the environment? And that's where the differentiation comes into play. Because if all of my past experience have been bad, the way I'm seeing this current environment is going to go through that lens. And so there's that self-reflection to look at your past to see whether or not that's influencing what you're looking at.
It's good. Yeah.
I don't know if I answered.
No, that's great. No, I got it. Yeah, because reflection could be a second ago, right? Yeah, up to a second ago.
I think I'm just reminded of it's nearly a parable, right? The plumber that comes out and fixes something, and there's an enormous bill, and why am I paying you so much money to just turn this one wrench on this pipe? And it's like, well, you're not paying me to turn the wrench, you're paying me for knowing what to do. And I think that self-awareness, and I've agonized and thought about short meetings, 15-minute meetings, half-an-hour meetings with a group of people, because it does take, for me, it takes energy and effort to assess where we're really at, where individual perspectives are coming from. Think about how you orchestrate something that is taking hold. It was a shock to me as I grew that I could spend a half an hour taking notes and thinking and maybe even some side conversations and this and that to make one event that is 15 minutes or half an hour, one interaction better. So I like what you said about the past, the present, but we take our present and help us forecast the future that we desire. And that's, to me, that's the work of the sage commander, right? Anyone can give the order. It is the sage commander who has this perspective that the individual contributors maybe don't, or maybe you lead them towards it.
So you want to jump in here? You haven't heard your voice yet?
Definitely. I think we live in a world, and I'm gonna anchor to a few words that have been mentioned. we live in a world where we seek distractions to build numbness, and to the point that it becomes delusional. So the reason I'm saying that is because there's something that precedes awareness. I think almost awareness becomes assumed. And actually, if you look at most leaders and most organizations, they fail to lead. Organizations fail, if you will, because there is that lack of awareness, but there's something precursor to that. And I think what is precursor to that, and if I quote Picasso explicitly, every act of creation is preceded or begins with an act of destruction. In order for awareness to build, there has to be a breakdown. And most leaders, if you ask me, have not experienced that tipping point, have not broken down, and they're in a role where there's a lot of influence and impact, but they're not aware. They are distracted. They're numb. Being distracted builds numbness. So I think there is something that is very crucial that's even before awareness and mindfulness, and that is truly a tipping point of destruction.
And have you seen, and Sai, just to flag the groundness a little bit too, like where have you seen that show up in your life?
If you look at, a lot of the leaders I encounter, if you will, and coaching executives, it's go, 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 right? It's get things done, move forward. There is their inability to recognize, if you will, awareness, inability to be aware in that sense, because they haven't experienced that breakdown. Likewise, I think all of us, I'm sure, if you Mark yourself, Cynthia, Steve, yourself, Whit, you could look back and reflect on a time where, something, I reached a point that I couldn't handle things anymore, for lack of better words. And then I had a breakthrough, an epiphany occurs at that tipping point. But that act of destruction, or that experience of destruction, is one I think that is assumed. And I think that is an invalid assumption, to be honest with you. So I walk into a situation presuming that we are not aware, we are sensitive, and then discover who perhaps have experienced that epiphany or has not experienced that tipping point. And then you begin to work with the situation.
It almost sounds like that there's a destruction of certainty and order that you had before, some state where things were a certain thing, and all of a sudden it's disrupted, all of a sudden it wakes you up to...
Yeah. And if I'll add one other thing, if you will, and then be quiet to see what the thoughts are. But even very explicitly in the Art of War, chaos is emergent from order, and likewise, order is emergent from chaos. So that dynamic is very, very much rooted in the Art of War and in application on an everyday basis.
Yeah.
So I'd love to jump into this because a lot of things that we talk about, I think we could take about 4 or 5 different things we heard. I could give a weekend long.
Exactly.
But I won't. I'll say, as far as destruction and creation, that was the title of John Boyd's core thesis and his core argument, that a system within itself cannot determine its own nature or character, and attempts to do so only lead to more confusion and more disorder. The entropy sets in. So I agree with that. We constantly have to destroy our models of perception, because we know that the nature of the universe is one of constant flux. Everything is always changing. And thus, I think someone said certainty and disorder. Really, when we're destroying certainty and disorder, which don't exist in a volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous environment, certainty does not exist. Disorder certainly does. And disorder tends to increase, because we know from the second law of thermodynamics that entropy in natural systems tends to increase. With that, we have to really destroy. I think another way of saying that, in layman's terms, is we have to destroy comfort. Because if we're comfortable, if we're lulled into believing that everything's always going to be this way, we've got all the formulas, we've done all the work, we've crunched all the numbers, we have everything should add up. When all of a sudden it doesn't, things deteriorate pretty quickly. And I find that that's one of the prime reasons why I recommend leaders to read the Sun Tzu, or to read and study the work and the briefings of John Boyd, because you'll understand immediately that everything is always in a state of becoming, and I'm absolutely required to break my models and revise my models if I want to stay relevant. Matter of fact, the title of our podcast, No Way Out, comes from his Briefing Conceptual Spiral. John Boyd says there's no way out of that constant, here's my Substack title, whirl of reorientation. So there's no way out of the whirl of reorientation, because if you stop reorienting, if you stop destroying your models and creating new ones, you're going to succumb to forces that will overwhelm you. Friction, volatility, uncertainty, etc. That's going to destroy you relatively quickly. And the other thing that we coach is that the lack of that, or the inability to do that, it's very obvious in competitors. So when you're, one of the things that we help team leaders and teams become more competitive, in addition to collaborative, cooperative, and creative. But it's really easy once you start working on that yourself and create your own team self-awareness on the things that you need to accomplish, or the models that you need to destroy in order to create new ones. It becomes glaringly evident in your opponents and your competitors when they're not doing that, and that becomes another Sun Tzu topic of exploiting gaps and opportunities.
That's really, to me, right? I'm hearing, or the way I'm consuming this is the unmovable object and the unstoppable force, right? There's this clash. I'm sure every one of us has worked with a leader who learned a management style, had, Mark, as you said, right, the formula, the decision-making process, they have it. The leaders get rooted in something, and they want change. They want different outcomes. They have a vision to execute against, except not for them. And that really, it's a fertile ground for a sage commander, because if you can highlight that, you open up a very rich conversation with the emperor, as it were, right?
Yeah, I would say that most leaders that I encounter, or not most, but many, they revert to what they learned at B school or anywhere else. It's more of a command and control model, that I can command and control things, that I can sit behind and be the architect of all this, and discount the fact that I'm leading humans, right? Where I think in order to become a better sage commander, as you say, following the Sun Tzu would be more along the lines of what John Boyd called appreciation and leadership, that I can replace command and control with appreciation and leadership, because I know that people are organic, that humans are part of nature. They're not clocks. They're not computers. They're not well-oiled machines that are referenced to with leaders using very poor metaphors. I think that when we understand that appreciation and leadership shows that I can identify the value and worth of someone or something, and then leadership being defined as the ability to inspire and influence others, that has to start inwardly, and it has to project out from those to those that you're leading, and you're going to get a lot further than a command and control model, where I think that the humans that I lead are as mechanical as the technology that we have, and that's a sure sign of an imminent disaster.
Yeah.
From my experience, chaos and control can't reside in the same sentence, if you will. And most leaders have the need to want to be in control. And with chaos being relinquishing that control, it could be just a lack of knowing how. They're not equipped to handle the chaos. Leaders should embrace chaos. I found the more I embraced chaos, the less I feared it. And so
Absolutely.
The,
VUCA's an advantage. Chaos becomes your advantage when you're doing this effectively. It becomes your advantage in a competitive situation. You in turn can make this your competitor's nightmare, all the while harnessing it to your own advantage, because as you're suggesting, you can't make these things go away. You're not going to be able to eradicate volatility, uncertainty, complexity, ambiguity. Yet if I understand its nature, I can harness it and leverage that to the advantage of my team, my organization, and create friction for my opposition.
Cynthia, that just like right on, but and that chaos, right? The enlightened leader, I'll call it enlightened leader, right? The person who gives up command and control and starts to address the chaos in a very holistic way, right? Command and control does not take hold, right? That if you think about the implications downstream, it becomes very demoralizing. So when you embrace the chaos and start to propagate decision making, start to share vision and goals and have people adopt, then you find out that, well, chaos is my friend, because my weapons, the tool set that I have is greater than myself, right? If I have to decide everything, it will be perfect in my view. If I have a talented team and we start to decide, woe be to the competitor that tries to answer to that.
But it's interesting. There's a challenge though, because in chaos, you think that the stress level goes up in the environment, and what happens is, what do command and control people do? First of all, are they aware that they are command and control? Probably not.
Probably not.
Under chaos, what do they typically do? They go tighter. They go even more so. They try to control things even more tightly. So there is something there where it becomes self-reinforcing of that model, to use Mark's word, that keeps them stuck. And then the question becomes: can there be a breakthrough? Can there be something be introduced in those circumstances such that that person can wake up and realize, go back to self-aware, become aware?
So I have a favorite question in that situation, and it sometimes takes weeks or months to get to the spot to ask the question. But the question simply is this: as a leader, what do you want? Do you want authority? And leaders have authority. Or do you want respect? And both are okay, but it really, now we start to open that up. If you lead with respect, and to me, this is very much art of war, right? If I have the respect and I lead for a goal or a vision and I empower, well, that takes a lot of courage, but it changes the paradigm instantly. And it's, I would say, for most organizations I've been at, absolutely counterintuitive. Chaos reigns, and we go to command and control. We exercise authority to bring order, and the counterintuitive. Really, we want to gain respect. We want to empower people, and that will bring more order and more loyalty, allegiance, unanimity than all the commands you could bark out in a week.
Yeah, I think that, as you're suggesting, people tend to double down in those sorts of scenarios, and they resort only to what they've always done. And if it's not working, then we haven't done it hard enough. And I also think it ties into what Cynthia has been suggesting and hitting around, is that you always have to be learning when you get that feedback. You know, she mentioned previous experience and things like that. As we operate in time, our orientation, our own internal operating system, it has to augment, because if it doesn't, if it's not dynamic, in other words, I think someone was just suggesting this, if it's not dynamic and it's static, we're going to be at a disadvantage, because a dynamic, either our orientation static or dynamic, our orientation shapes how we make observations, how we form decisions and actions, and how we learn from those actions. And if our orientation is one that's static and misaligned and not harmonized, then we're only going to fail, because we're going to drift further and further away from reality. Our perception will not be able to handle mismatches. It's not going to be able to handle friction, because everything that we see and sense is directly influenced what we believe, what we think, where we're from, what we've done. And if we're not changing that, if we're not adapting that, if we're not learning new things, if we're not revising those models, it's only going to take us down the wrong path.
And keep you stuck.
And
keep you stuck in the life.
Yeah, and keep you stuck. Because I think a lot of people are looking for, in a command and control system or within a static orientation, we're looking for formulaic certainty. We're trying to search for certainty with certain formulas, knowing full well, or at least being ignorant full well, that markets aren't like that. The world's not like that. Relationships aren't like that. They're volatile, they're uncertain, they're complex and ambiguous. So we have to have that agility, that flexibility to smash and revise and update our models, because all of our models are going to shape how we sense, how we decide, how we act, and how we learn.
So if I can chime in, kind of going back to your initial question, if you will, relative to the journey and what have you, the journey itself requires building the capability for creative destruction. That's very, very key. It starts with creative destruction, exactly as precursor to awareness. And then the shift, as I like to term it, if you will, the shift that occurs, and these are very key phrases that I've used with executives, and it hits them once they experience it very hard. It's a shift from the vicious ego-based reality control cycle, which is being described, to what I like to call the virtuous eco-based reality navigation cycle. You're no longer in control, but you're navigating reality. And it's no longer about you, but very much an ecosystem in which you're operating. So, I mean, some of those are some of the keywords that I use with teams, organizations, etc. The how is through exposure, back to your point, Whit. And it could be as simple as pulling, I'll say, Mark or Cynthia or Steve or yourself, Whit, into a situation that begins to stress you and shock you in order to provoke you to become more awake.
If you violate the mantra, it's always got to be in this order: people, ideas, things, always in that order. If you violate that, one, it's obvious in a competitive situation. Two, it would suggest that you have some manner of operating where you're looking to constantly find and take comfort in certainty, which doesn't exist. Or you put over reliance in systems, or you put over reliance in technology, and you retrofit it to people. It doesn't work like that. It's always people, ideas, things in that order. And that was an admonition from John Boyd, again, following Sun Tzu and tying into what Sai is saying, is that humans are organic. We are the ecosystem. A company, a team is a living organism made up of complex adaptive systems. And it always has to be that: people, ideas, and things.
And Mark, what comes to mind, I think about the risks of the tyranny of instrumentality. That things, if you reverse that order that you just put, and you go things, ideas, people, that's instrumentality at the most rudimental level, where there's going to be disconnect, and then you fall into things like command control, trying to make control. And Steve, I love it when I think about quality, order, and control. And what happens is command and control and instrumentality going after the things really creates a high degree of a need for control. And maybe behind that is that, think about the leaders. What's going on inside them? What are they so afraid of? What's it vulnerable to them? You have any thought about that? Like, you think about what's driving them? Go ahead, Cynthia.
I would say lack of control.
And what's behind that? Why? What are they afraid of?
Not being in control. Do they even know what that looks like to relinquish to the environment, that control?
Okay.
So I think there's a scenario, there's a pattern. Leaders get promoted because they do a good job. Oftentimes they're smart and capable, and they come up with the right answer in different scenarios, and pretty soon now I'm a leader in the organization. I think the fear is that I am successful as a leader because I'm smart. I've done this before and it works. And I don't mean that in a terribly prideful way. That's experiential, right? I'm a leader, and I got here because I can do this. It is a giant leap to say, I will let my team or people come up with a solution that is not mine and might not be the best as I see it. That's daunting. Right? Somebody that's made their career and they've had this great success because they know the answer. To give that up is a huge risk. Your career's on the line. It's highly vulnerable. What if they're wrong? Like, well, I mean, to me is, well, what if you're wrong? What if they're right? What if your team comes up with a better solution than you would all by yourself? What if you decide everything, and 3 years from now you have a team of robots, versus you figure out how to leverage the intellect within your organization, and you have a team of creators. It's night and day, but I don't blame anybody that's stuck in the paradigm of I'm successful because I did, and trying to get to I'm a leader because I let. Big change.
I think no one has said it, but we're hitting around it. When you don't have empathy, when there's a lack of empathy, it doesn't always yield the best results. And when you run on that, you lose contact cohesively with your own team internally. And I think that leaders that don't have good empathy, I think they also become disconnected from their customers and clients.
And themselves.
Yeah.
Well, it starts with that, but they don't know. They don't know that because, as we said earlier, they don't have the self-awareness.
I'll go back. I was working with Sai and on an engagement, and worked with a leader who said it was a large organization, 600-700 people in the development space, and too many things going on at once. And the leader kept saying, I just wish that people were fungible. He wanted to take people and move them about and get results no matter who did what. And it's nearly criminal. It's hurtful to me personally. What a lack of understanding of the human condition. I don't want fungible people. I want the messiness. I want for every weakness, there's a strength. So we look at that, and understanding people is it. I don't want fungible people. I want a big old mess of different points of view and different communication styles, because it makes us all better.
Do you find that those are vulnerable to competitive threats? Those sorts of systems are vulnerable to competitive threats?
What sorts of system? The ones that are
well, the one if again, this would be something that I would coach to the leaders that I work with. When you observe that sort of behavior, that someone is looking to have fungible people or move them around like chess pieces, I think that those sorts of systems are are vulnerable to competitive threat because they're not aligned with reality and how things actually work. That's what I was implying.
Oh yeah, 100%, right? I mean, the other aspect of that is we can work with people and build good teams. I think I got this from Sai, right? Being a good team and being good at teaming are two dramatically different things. And I will take the latter every time, right? So we're not fungible. You build that. If I have a group of people, if I have 60 or 80 people and an organizational culture that values teaming and we have those skills, and I can start to put different people in a room together to drive to a solution, and 3 months later I can move that around and be equally as successful, that gives you defense against change in the wild. That's a far healthier organization than having one really great team that is so fragile that it can't stand exposure to the enemy.
One example that I observed was in an organization where the focus was on resources, processes, and tools. To Sai's point, like a distraction. They were just consumed with technology, resources, put more people on a particular project, and the process that was in place, opposed to looking at the human dynamics that were right in front of them and seeing that you have chaos at an all-time high, dysfunction, how we relate to one another, how we communicate with one another. Those things, if those are absent, you're going to be in an environment where that cycle, where you get stuck because you're not taking hold, you're not taking into account individuals, the empathy is not there, you're not able to work from the inside out. So a team is only, look at it like this, an omelet is only as good as the eggs you put in it. Okay. And so from a team perspective, if a leader does not know how to get in and take hold on an individual level for himself, but then show empathy towards each individual on that team to bring that team to be individually whole first, and then together they could do so much more. And not only sow the seeds into that one team, but now if you take those same team members and put them on another team with all strangers, they're going to infect that area, and it just grows and grows and grows. So it would behoove leaders to take hold, not just in the resources, processes, and tools, but also the human dynamics of the people they work with, how they're communicating, how they're relating to one another, and get down dirty with that. That's leading.
I have been at more than one client where I have banned the use of the word resources.
What word?
Resources. It's well, for beginners. It's disrespectful. They're human beings.
Yeah.
I substitute capabilities. What are our capabilities? And it changes, right? Capabilities are personal, and capabilities can change over time. And it's you know what? If I pull oil out of the ground, no matter how I refine it, it's still a petroleum product. That's a resource. Capabilities change over time, and human beings can, our demands can change, and so can our capabilities. And we just start to think about the value of the person, and it's not a resource. Cement is a resource for building a road.
You know, it just raised the question on to happen, you know, think about the power of language and terminology. And, you're just giving another good example, Steve, but it just raises, like, we have to understand, what do we mean by the terms? For example, leadership, we throw it around and it means so many different things unless we define what it means to us. And as a community, trying to build some kind of common interpretation of that in a way that is useful for building in what we think is most important. So empathy, for example, just take that. Would you call that a capability?
I would. I definitely would. I'd go a step further. My last engagement, empathy across the organization was a critical success factor for the company. They had their struggles, but they understood each other and they all wanted to work together. There's a lot of organizations that would die for that.
Yeah.
So there's a few interesting words that we've been using, and it would behoove me to definitely mention this. The kind of looping back to where you sort of triggered us here, Whit. I think one of the most personal questions someone can be asked is, "Who are you?" And looking at leaders and organizations, that question is very rarely confronted, because it forces us to confront our nature at that point. And throughout the conversation, we've used the word fear. There's actually a great book that I have to recommend, especially given the title of what we're discussing here. It's by Kristen Almer. The book is actually called The Art of Fear. And a lot of times we look at fear as a negative, where actually fear is quite neutral. It can be accepted as a positive or negative. If it's a negative, it often pushes us. If it's positive, it often attracts us. The reason we do things sometimes are very explicitly because of fear, but we have to be risk aware, risk savvy, and what have you. But I think a lot of what we're talking about really goes to that core aspect. Is most people are not willing to recognize and deal with their very nature. I can be very nice. I can be very naughty. I can be very aggressive. Without that rooted acknowledgement, the rest of it is a facade, to be quite honest. And the facade, especially nowadays, penetrates our relationships, right? At both personal and professional. One example that I love to talk about, we don't have enough time to dive in here, psychological safety. With all due respect, who the hell told you the world was going to be safe? It's not. So just things that, confronting our own nature is a very, very fundamental aspect that is often missed, underlying a lot of the great conversation that's been going on.
I'd love to take you up on that one, Si. We'll do that another time.
Indeed.
I'm with you. I am with you. I really am. Look, I just want to be aware, we got about 5 minutes here, and I want to be respectful of the time. I would like to make sure there's an opportunity for you each to bring yourself in terms of, for the viewers here, if there's some pearl, some wisdom, some insight lesson on their journey, wherever they are, that you would want to pass on to them and offer to them. I think it would be great if you could offer here's what I suggest for people that want to grow as a sage commander, for lack of a better word, but just to grow in that whole area. What would you say is something that you've learned that's important for you that you would like to offer to the viewers?
I'll be brave. What I've learned, Sage Commander is, I'm not sure I am one. I've been told I am, but I'm at least a student.
Yeah, you're on the path.
There's challenges, there's risks, there's rewards, and very often we know the right thing from Art of War perspective and the fundamental truths that lie. And it is, Sage Commander can be a very isolated, lonely job. Doing the right thing is sometimes hard, but always right. And I felt like I'm making moves or forcing things to happen or making decisions that are high risk, but it's grounded in my certainty that something is right. And that pays off. So advice, contemplation, understand what's going on. And if you're doing the right thing, it's always worth the risk.
Great.
I would add, be the example. You'd be surprised how many people are watching you. And so back to the work, if you spent the majority of your time working on self and becoming self-aware, knowing who you are, when someone asks you that question, you bring a lot more empathy to whatever situation you get into. And so I would definitely advise folks to continue the path of self-reflection, being an example on the practice and watching those seeds come back.
Well, I guess we shouldn't assume that everyone has read The Art of War, but I would hope that people would read it in such a way that they realize that he's not necessarily trying to prepare you as someone that's actually in the military, actually in combat, which needs to be shifted, that these are universal concepts which can be applied anywhere, no matter where you are, and that words like conflict and competition and deception and other things, that they have application far beyond actual physical combat. I would say that most of it, remember, is cognitive. And if I'll give him a plug, is if you need a good explanation of Sun Tzu, would be from James Gimian in his book, Rules of Victory. That's a very good text to help others understand the Sun Tzu for what it is and how it can apply and help in every aspect of your life, personally and professionally. And then the last thing that I would say is that you need to understand John Boyd's OODA loop sketch. And you can Google OODA loop and you can go down a rabbit hole, and I guarantee it, you'll go in the wrong direction. If you have to understand the OODA loop sketch, OODA loop in quotes sketch, to understand how we deal with complexity and reality day to day is thinking, acting humans whose orientation shapes how we see, how we test our hypotheses, how we learn from those things. That's a critical differentiation, and it ties well with Sun Tzu as well. So
that's great.
Excellent contributions all around, folks. And I would add, kind of, for anyone out there, really challenge yourself to curiously and creatively look for opportunities to expose yourself to situations and reality where you don't jeopardize your survival, but at the same time, don't sacrifice your ability to thrive and thriving in the world around you. Quite often finding a partner, companions, right? Working with people on this incredible journey called life. Otherwise, you'll miss it. So truly, truly think about it that way.
Wow. Very good stuff. Very, very good. Thank you all. I think this has been a wonderful thing. I just want to see if anybody's got any burning final comment that you want to make, or are we in a good place? Because I think our time is up, but it's been a very good conversation. Does anybody have anything that's on mind that I really want to say this as a closing comment?
The one saved round that I had was from what Syed said. When people have a facade, or when they're applying something professionally and not personally, that human interaction, human behavior is universal. And I've worked with several people where their professional self is very different than their personal self at the core, not in the periphery, at the core, and that's a very dangerous place to be. So when you read things like this Sun Tzu and you learn from scholars like Jim Gimian his co-author, you realize that this applies everywhere, and you can execute and flow with this consistently everywhere. But that's the only.
That's a great one, Mark. That's a great closing comment. All right. Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Have a wonderful weekend. Bless
you.
you. All right.
Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.